guys want to thank you all so much for coming. We're just thrilled to have Vera Strange, who is pen name for Livia Blackburn.
No, it's my pen name. Although Olivia's got a cool name too.
But she's here for the Disney Chill series, and in particular, the brand new one featuring my favorite villain of all time, Maleficent. That's who I'm representing. So I am so thrilled to have her here for this. Jennifer is also a Stoker finalist, and has also contributed to the Star Wars universe. And we're going to have Livia Blackburn here as a conversation partner in just a little bit. And she is a New York Times bestselling fantasy author, and started off in neuroscience reading, and is now a full-time writer. And she'll do for shortly the rest of the chapter. But we want to thank all of you for being here, and please give a real warm welcome to the
Well, she'll be here soon. Well, thanks you guys for tuning in and stopping by. I was saying it's been such a strange 2 years where we've all been living in with the pandemic. And are people leaving their houses? Are they staying home? Is there traffic? Is there not traffic? So it's kind of the wild, wild west of living in the real world. And I think a lot of us authors like living in fantasy worlds, which is probably part of why we like to write, and a lot of readers like it. So it's been my saving grace during the pandemic. So I'm here to talk to you guys about my newest book, which is called Once Upon a Scream. Disney loves their puns, in case anyone has noticed that so far. And this is the 6th book in my Disney Chill series, but this is actually the first time I'm doing any sorts of live signings or events, because the whole series has published starting April 2020. So as I was discussing with my friend Peter, who's here, it's a really interesting time to try to publish and launch books and see how that all goes. But I've been really gratified that the series seems to have caught on. Disney has highlighted it as an area that's really working for them, and these books are my love letter to the books I grew up reading. Goosebumps, Christopher Pike, yes, Mr. Stephen King, Clive Barker. I think who doesn't find Stephen King when they're a tween or teen? I always say he's the best young adult author who isn't technically a YA author. And so creating this brand and book series with Disney has been really exciting. And one of the best things has been how open Disney has been to not only letting me do what I want and go as dark and terrible as I want, but also be really creative with the storylines, with the situations of the kids. So the series launched with Ursula, because, you know, they were like, who do you want to write? And it's very hard not to say Ursula. And I know we've just lost Pat, who voiced her so incredibly and so iconically. So it's been actually hard for me to think and talk about Ursula since that news very recently. But of all the Disney villains, Maleficent is my favorite. She's got a lot of fan favorites. There's a whole trilogy of films all about Maleficent, and I'm kind of glad we saved her for book 6, because I was very nervous actually to write her, because I very much wanted to do her justice. And, you know, she is the mistress of all evil, and I feel like she'd be very upset with me if I didn't, and maybe potentially even come after me. So this is the longest of the series so far. It's probably the most intricate. This was my favorite film growing up as a little girl. I remember sometimes somebody asked me, like, what's your favorite Disney movie? And I said, Sleeping Beauty. And he goes, oh, well, what did you love so much about that princess? And I said, nobody loves Sleeping Beauty for the princess. Aurora is boring. She's kind of basic, actually. So is Philip. Sorry, Prince Philip. If you loved Sleeping Beauty as a kid, you loved it for one reason, and that was Maleficent. Actually, my favorite princess is Belle from Beauty and the Beast. I also love Elsa from Frozen, but Elsa, in my mind, is almost a villain. She's like a half villain. She's technically a princess, but, you know, she's got, like, ice witch powers. So growing up, I idolized Maleficent. She's so fantastic. And when I was first trying to figure out what to do with her, because what I do with the series that's kind of different is I bring the Disney villains into our contemporary world to haunt kids. So nobody is safe from the villains. And usually I'll go back to the original film and try to break down, well, what was this really about? Like, what was this villain really trying to do? Or what were they representing thematically, you know? And they're all different. Like Hades, Hades is like, just like, he's just mad at his brother. He's like, I'm doing God stuff. I'll manipulate humans because, you know, I got it. But he's not literally evil. He's the god of the underworld, but he's like, I should be on Mount Olympus, right? And he's still mad at Zeus. Whereas Maleficent is different. And I don't know if anyone remembers what happened with the party, you know, where she shows up and Death curses a baby. And I was like, well, why? Well, it's because she wasn't invited, y'all. Like, she's mad because she wasn't invited to a party. Like, she, like, party crashes in the most extra way possible, where she just, like, materializes in green flames. And she basically says, well, you invited the gentry, the rabble. She's basically saying, you invited everyone except for me, so now I'm going to death curse your baby. So I was like, well, that's a very relatable situation for kids, right? Not being invited to a party. Come on, you guys all know, like, has anyone here ever been excluded from the cool party or something you really wanted to go to? And, like, how does it feel? Well, it feels pretty terrible, right? And it's a highly relatable circumstance for most everyone to have FOMO over a fun party, an outing, even going to Disneyland, stuff like that. So I was like, well, that's a great jumping off point to craft a character who is also excluded from a birthday party. And so I began my stories by really kind of starting with that sort of theme. And it's like, that's something Maleficent would understand. Like, if you're upset because you didn't get to go to a party and you want revenge on whoever maybe pranked you or excluded you, well, Maleficent can get on board with that. That's for sure. So usually I start with a situation like that. And then, as most writers I know, like, characters are what drive story. So I really spent a lot of time, which I think is something that differentiates or sometimes elevates this series compared to some other books, is that I really spent a lot of time creating characters that are in interesting situations, and we try to strive for pretty broad representation. So I kind of had this idea, because I grew up in the South, of setting the story in the South, in a small town in the South, and kind of creating this aura of, like, roses and forests, and even a fake kind of homage to a castle that's a house. And then I had the idea of bringing a character from New York City and forcing them to live in the Deep South and the culture shock that that could entail. So the character in this book, Dawn, which is an homage to Aurora, of course, and my middle name is Dawn. She is going to school in the big city. She has her two best friends, but she's about 13. She's one of those kids she's not like a bad kid, but she's starting to make some choices that maybe aren't the best. And again, I find this is a very real thing. Her friends and her have been skipping school a little bit, just doing a couple things that aren't really on the best behavior. And then something more major happens where they get caught shoplifting. And Dawn doesn't technically do it. Her friend does it, and it's something minor, like the corner store. It's some nail polish. It's not like a high-ticket item, but they get caught. And Dawn didn't do it, but she was there, and she didn't stop it. So her parents get very upset with her and decide that she's punishment and to get her away from the bad elements in the city, being her friends, and the schools, which aren't the best right now, decide to ship her off to live with her two aunts down in the deep countryside, where she's going to finish up her school year kind of in exile in this place called Castletown. And of course, Dawn thinks it's the worst punishment on the face of the earth. It's so unfair what's being done to her. And as we know, I always say when I'm talking about antagonists in stories, there's the big ones like Maleficent, but when you're writing in middle grade fiction, parents are often the antagonists. And they're not arch or evil, right? These parents really want the best for their daughter, and they both have jobs in the city, so they can't afford to just take up and leave. They're trying to do something that they think is right for their daughter, but of course she doesn't understand that, and she feels like she's totally being targeted, picked on. And so it was kind of fun to write a lot of the culture clash of going from the busy big city to somewhere like the Deep South, where people talk slower, they have different slang, like, hey y'all, right? And everything is just really different, and where she really misses being home. And I got to do my first LGBTQ plus representation in the series. Disney has been really great about letting us expand representation, so the aunts are actually married to each other. And I like to write this stuff in stories where I just kind of treat it as normal. It's accepted in the family, it's accepted in the community, and it isn't the focus of this story. But I find that kind of representation is really helpful for other folks to see that. And I like the fact that I said it in the South and did that and let it be accepted, just to say it's not always going to be the way it might feel in some places right now, that it is possible for there to be good people getting along and trying to be good members of the community. So yeah, that was sort of the launching off point. And then when she gets to school, basically the friends are like here, what are the nice girls are actually the mean girls. So when in New York City, people just like tell you to their face. Like if they don't like you, if whatever they feel, they're pretty blunt and straightforward typically. And in the South, it's not like that. It's bless your heart, right? Sounds really nice, hey, bless your heart, bless her heart, right? Sounds so sweet and loving when it's actually very backhanded kind of put down. And so that's part of where this comes from. And of course, she doesn't get invited to a party, and then her aunt's own an antique shop, accidentally pricks her finger, summons the mistress of all evil, and we're off to the races. And one of the fun things about crafting the story for this book was trying to figure out what to do with the sleeping curse, because I was like, well, that's really boring, right? If you have a main character that just falls asleep. I see Livia. Hi, Livia. Come on in and join us. No worries. I was just talking about what to do with the sleeping curse. I was like, well, if you have a character that just falls asleep, where's the fun in that? So I thought it'd be fun if it happened to everyone around her started to get tired and just pass out, and then maybe turn a little bit into things like zombies. So yeah, welcome, Livia. I know the traffic was crazy. Hey guys, this is Livia Blackburn. Please welcome her. We have some folks online as well. And she wrote this great book, Feather and Flame, which is the second book in the Queen's Council series, I believe, this new series Disney's doing, and stars Mulan, right? I know. I'm like, we're unmasking, guys. You can like see our faces. Beware. So welcome. I was just talking about how I kind of came up with the story for the book and what it was like kind of trying to figure out what to do with Maleficent. So we've known each other for a while now.
Yeah, I haven't seen you since before that.
That's what I was saying to Peter. I was like, it's been like pre-pandemic times. But in the past, we've been on some panels together, and we both went to Harvard. Right. Somehow we both went to Harvard and ended up writing this kind of junk. Just kidding. No, it's awesome. It's actually the best stuff in the world.
Fine literature.
Yeah, fine, beautiful things that I love the most. So I guess let's start about how did you come to writing for Disney? Was this the first Disney brand book that you've done, or had you done some other Disney brands?
I had done other books with Disney, but they were my own original thing, and they just kind of acted as a publisher. This was my first Disney IP.
Very cool.
Yeah, and so I never thought I'd be an IP writer. IP stands for intellectual property, which is writing someone else's characters. And I got an email one day that was like Disney looking for IP writer, and like I opened it thinking I was going to say no, and then I looked and it said a Mulan novel, and I was like, oh no, I got to write this one. So I emailed back my agent and was like, I'm super interested, put me down. So I had to audition. So they basically gave me maybe like a 2-page summary of, like a very vague summary of what the book was going to be about. And I proposed 2 sample scenes, wrote about 25 pages, and that was my audition.
Yeah, same process for me. And I believe I remember I was in Key West at a writer's residency for the studios at Key West when I was doing the same thing you were doing. And I think we were talking to each other too, because we were both getting our offers.
At the same time, I don't know how we found out, but I guess we both mentioned it.
I can't remember. We must have been in communication in some fashion, because I know you and I have talked over the years. And it was so interesting because obviously our series are very different. But, coming in, this was the first IP writing I had done as well. But it's the same thing. They got me with, do you want to write spooky Ursula? Do you want to scare children? Yes, I would love to scare children with Disney villains. So yeah, that's so cool. And Mulan, I was saying, recently I've been talking a lot about villains and princesses. She's one of the best. She's one of my favorite princesses. And a lot of people love her. What is it that's so beloved, or what drew you to her where you're like, I have to write this?
I was in high school when Mulan came out, and it was so exciting. Chinese Disney princess, and she's just so great. Her character, she's so like brave and selfless and noble. What I love about her is that nowadays in YA there's a lot of kind of like kick-ass female heroines and so forth. But the thing about Mulan is that there's a lot of girls that like heroines that like go out to find glory or to like find themselves. That's a very typical kind of Western narrative, like someone going out for self-actualization, kind of becoming their own person, which is a great like storyline, perfectly valid. It's very common because we live in a Western society, and that's what we get. what I really liked about Mulan is that her story tends to be a little more Eastern in the sense that it's about loyalty, it's about kind of selflessness, duty. And so, Mulan, like a lot of the other heroines, she goes out has adventures, but she does it for a very specific reason, which is to save her father's life, to fulfill a duty that her father could not carry out. So that was a lot of fun to kind of like write that into the story and emphasize.
Do you pick up where the film leaves off, or tell folks where your story picks up, or how that was determined, like where the storyline would go?
Yeah, it's basically, it goes off the animated feature, and so basically it starts off a few years after the cartoon, and the Queen's Council series, every single book is about Disney princesses becoming political leaders, and so that was the only thing I had to stick to my book.
So it's the anti-Hunger Games. Because at the end she's like, I'm just gonna go get married and have babies, guys, and not rebuild the world. Thanks. So it's like okay, well we have an answer for that, which is princesses can be politically involved and leaders.
I like that.
Sorry, a lot of people didn't make it through Mockingjay or all the way there.
Totally lost.
Oh, we were talking about how it picks up a few years how all the books in your series pick up where the princesses are going to become political leaders. Is that's why it's called Queen's Council.
Right. So she becomes Empress of China through some events, and so there's a lot of sexism pushback there. She has lots of challenges. The Huns are still at the border, and then there's also Shang, who I don't know. When I watched the movie, I kind of wanted a little bit more to that story.
Yeah.
And I got to write that.
That's so fun.
Yeah, but you have read, this is
6. That's what's so wild, is I was saying that your series, although of course your books, they're totally different sorts of styles of series. But yeah, this is a 6 and book 7's already drafted and will be out next year.
Well, so, do you have a favorite villain?
Yes, it is Maleficent, which is why it's been such an interesting thing to finally tackle her and write her. And I am hearing that readers think it's the best of the series, which made me happy because, as mentioned, I was nervous. Yeah, I know you took a look at it. Yeah, she's so fun, and I feel like the world that is created, I loved kind of importing the ether, things like spinning wheels and roses and ravens.
So how do you get into the head of such an iconic character? Like, do you do exercises or?
I usually just spend my weird time by myself thinking about them, but a lot of times I'll go revisit the original film, which I imagine you must have done when you were breaking Mulan, that you go, and we go back to the original animated films, because that's really where these characters are created and really what we're basing on, not, Maleficent has had, I think there's a 3rd film coming, and those are wonderful. The Angelina Jolie movies are great, but they're different. And so for me, certain characters, they are, for me, Maleficent, she's the mistress of all evil. She summons all the powers of hell. She's considered the most powerful. So it's kind of like, I remember I was talking to my friend Stephanie Folsom, who wrote Thor Ragnarok, or was one of the screenwriters, and she's always the only woman ever in the room for any of these things, and they were like, what's the motivation for the goddess of death? What's her motivation? And Kate Blanchett plays her, and Stephanie you're the woman, you must know her motivation. And Stephanie just looks at them and she goes, she's the goddess of death and she enjoys it. What do you mean? What's her deep motivation, right? She's the goddess of death. And to me, Maleficent is very much that. She's Maleficent. She's the mistress of all evil and she enjoys it, right?
So I'm also curious. So, you have every single one of your books that has the iconic villain. It also but it's not the main character. You also have the kid. So, what considerations do you go into when you're writing the kid?
And the thing is, each book is writing a whole book all over again. They are anthology style and standalone, which is fun, which means you can enter at any book in the series, because some people will start to be like, hey, Cruella's my favorite, I'm going to start with Cruella. And it kind of harkens back, I think, to when I was a kid in the bookstores, how there were series I was reading and sometimes they just wouldn't have them. This is when they had Walden books in the mall, and I'd be so upset they were missing book 3 and then randomly book 9. And that's why I love stuff like Nancy Drew Hardy Boys Goosebumps, because you could read them out of order, and it was still annoying when they had the gaps because I'm a perfectionist that way. But you could still go reading forward without missing huge swaths of things. So basically, usually everyone I set in a different place. About half the books are set in real places, about half in completely made up. And the sort of contemporary location is usually something that invokes the story. So Ursula, for example, is set in a place that I call Triton Bay, but it's kind of like Monterey Bay, like California coastal with an aquarium, because the Monterey Bay Aquarium is my favorite. And then some like Cruella is set in Chicago, because Cruella says urban to me. It says city. And then usually the kid, it's something to do with what the villain is grappling with that my kid's going to be dealing with. So when I went down for Hades, and I rewatched Hercules, which by the way is like the most flirtatious of all the Disney movies. If you don't remember Hercules, I was like, I hadn't seen it in a while. I was like, this movie is like, basically here's the plot of Hercules. Hercules, you need to train. And then this like hot girl walks by and he's like, I can't focus. May's here, right? Or whatever. And so, but to me, it spoke a lot about athletics. So I was like, well, athletics is something, if we pick up a kid who's training and his family is really focused on something athletic, that to me said kind of like a Hercules kind of idea. Or, you know, they're all different. In Cruella, it's a girl who was in a public school and has a single mom, and so finance has been tight, but her mother has managed to get her a scholarship to an elite private school, right? And it's a girl who shows up in her thrift store clothes and everyone is dressed to the nines, because Cruella is about fashion, and she ends up stealing a house, and everyone's obsessed with House of DeVille fashion. It's like trending on the social media apps, and so she ends up stealing a coat because she wants to look fashionable and fit in. And again, that's, I think, something we can all relate to. Like, I remember being in middle school, and if you didn't have the right brand, like your mom bought you the wrong brand of shoe, like you would be mercilessly targeted. And it's kind of cruel, but kids can be that way. And so I think with writing middle school, it's always about, I'm just like, do you remember how dark and terrible middle school was? Just like lean into the angst. Does anyone here? I'm like, maybe I'll run into someone one day who's like, middle school was the peak of my life. I was the king of middle school, because we know there's those high school people running around. But I think for most people, middle school, for a variety of reasons, is a very challenging time, but it's also why it makes it so fun to write middle grade fiction, which I love. And so I know your book is technically YA, correct?
Yes.
They're both fun in their own ways, and I know that we both played in a lot of playgrounds. So I think it's just been really rewarding to see the reception, because Disney characters have huge followings, as I'm sure you've encountered, and the villains alone have huge followings.
That's true.
I read somewhere that they were going to originally build an evil Disneyland, like a dark Disneyland, and Maleficent's castle was supposed to be the centerpiece, and they scrapped the project because they decided it was too dark and scary for kids. And I'm like, oh, that would have been so cool.
That would be pretty cool. Yeah, but I think my daughter would totally speak out.
Yeah. How old's your daughter?
She's 5.
Oh, that's a good age.
Yeah, and she was actually really interested in that book. I was like, no, it's not like you're not good. When you're slightly old.
When you're slightly older, you can still have the nightmares. You'll just handle them better. Yeah, they're a fun introduction, I think, to get kids into reading. And I think you probably feel the same way, because I know you've written YA series before. And I think, you know, one of the great things about writing for younger readers is just these are considered great for reluctant readers, boys, people who are hard to reach. And like anything that can get a kid reading can be life-changing. You know, I'm sure that was a big deal for you. Yeah, like, you know, I read like voraciously as a kid, and it was an escape, and I'm sure it contributed to me doing well in school and basically what we do now for our work, right?
Right.
So, what else should we talk about? Who's your favorite villain? Do you have a favorite Disney villain? Because it's kind of interesting. Some of the movies, like Mulan, they don't really have a prototypical villain, and then some of them do.
And Encanto doesn't have a villain.
It's more of just about the family.
You know, is Taka a villain? Because it's kind of, you know who the fun villain is? The crab guy on.
Oh,
Tamatoa.
Thank you. Yeah, Tamatoa.
Yeah, I guess he would be a real villain. Like Taka isn't really.
I haven't thought about him in a while. And is Mulan your favorite Disney princess?
Yeah.
I always say, like, I love Belle, but I mean, Beauty and the Beast, but I think it's because she's a book nerd.
Right, like Belle's pretty cool too.
You know, like that's her thing. Like she likes, and she falls in love with the Beast. And I think there is a retelling where he stays the Beast. But I was like, he's so cool as the Beast. I wouldn't want to undo the curse. Like she fell in love with him as Beast. Like she loves Beast. Right. She loves the library, and like you got Beast powers. You're basically like Wolverine. You know, like you're gonna go back to just being
cute.
He's cute.
Yeah.
I would kiss him. He's cute, and like, so you just want to go back to being like a basic prince. Yeah, like stay beast. I think someone probably has written that. I can't be the first person that's been like, stay beast.
Sure.
But so how did you find working with Disney? Did you find that they gave you a lot of permission to do a lot of things?
Yeah. I get that question a lot. So when I took the job, I kind of thought, because they would kind of give me an outline, or like, this is what they were going to do. And they did give me a synopsis, but it was very, very vague. And actually, like, the historical period they gave me spanned like 1,000 years. They were like, it's sometime in the 1,000 years.
You're like, that narrows it down a lot. Thanks, guys.
Right. My first phone call with my editor, I asked her, how much do we, what needs to be set in stone? And she was basically nothing. Like, nothing that I've given you is set in stone. She just has to wield political power. And so we basically started from scratch. Like, we had this brainstorming meeting, like, got a few plot points, and then my editor was the one who made the initial outline, maybe a one-page outline, which was really helpful because she like put it into.
Wow, that's nice.
I know, right? She offered to, and at first I was like, maybe I need to be in control. I was like, she's offering to do all this work.
I know. Take it.
Right. So she gave me an outline, and we passed it back and forth until it became an expanded outline, and then I just started drafting after she okayed it.
How long did it take you to draft the novel from once you had your outline? Because as I always talk about, I do really pretty detailed outlines because when we're working with IP, there's a lot of departments that this goes through for approval. And part of this is canon. It's the same because I did write a Darth Vader story that's canon for Star Wars. And you want to talk about having to like have a lot of rules and a lot of things that are off limits, but they are trying to keep their brand in order. And you don't know everything that's going on behind the scenes with these characters. So how long, once you started drafting, did it take you to write this book?
So I actually had a long time to draft it. Almost like 6 months or so. And then,
that sounds nice.
Yeah, it was.
My turnarounds are so crazy and all my deadlines. I don't know what the karma with me and like my deadlines is.
Well, you've had 6 books, and in the amount of time I had 1 book out. So that
every project I get, it's like, and you have like people like sell books and they're like, it'll be published in 2027, and my books are like, no, it's fast track and it will be out in 6 months, and like I'm like, what? Like seriously, every single project. But sometimes it would be nice to have more breathing room. We've gone to more once a year schedule, so I've had more time on this book and the next one that's coming out next year, because I had 3 out in a year. That's crazy.
Yeah. So how much is your editor involved in making these books?
Yeah, so I'm actually on my 4th editor. Welcome to publishing, guys. When you have a long series, has anyone ever experienced Heather Knowles? She's fantastic. So Disney's had a lot of reorganization lately because a lot of folks have had to move to Orlando. If anyone follows Disney news, they have a new campus out there. And Florida and Disney's been in the news a lot, if you have heard about that. So I'm on my 4th editor, but part of that is internal restructuring. The editor I had who actually did this book with me, Holly, has been moved to being in charge of princesses. So she had to move off my series, and Heather is villains. So they have like a restructuring now involving characters. All the editors, I would say, are great, but the first editor I had, Eric Gueron, who I created this with, left because he sold a lot of his own books. So he has a ton of his own children's books, picture books. He's just writing now. He has a YA called, I think, A Tale of Two Princes coming out. He his stuff seems to definitely be like LGBTQ plus, which is really cool. He has a children's book called Bye Bye Binary. Hi Eric, I'm calling out to your books. They're so cool. It's been a lot of editors, but part of that is that, going into a 7-book series, and the way publishing works, but they've all been great. And from the beginning, I was given just a little bit, kind of like what you were. I want to say it was like 3 paragraphs or something on Ursula. And I did audition, same as you, with about 2.5 chapters, and got hired to do the series. And starting at the 3rd book, which is Captain Hook, they're all original stories and breaks from me that I pitched to them. So they've given me a lot of permission, and the best is they've let me go dark and terrible with every ending. It is Unhappily Ever After. I was like, I'm going to write these scares just like I'd write them if it was like, even for someone older. And Disney can pull it back if they want, because it's harder to make something scary that isn't than to take something that's scary and pull it back a little and soften it. So it's better to be too scary. And from the beginning, they've been like, this scare is great. Oh, this is so creepy. Oh, wow. Yeah, this is amazing. Oh, this ending. And so I was like, okay, wow, they've actually let me go darker than Star Wars did.
I'm curious about the reader reactions to like the
When the first book came out, which is part of your nightmare, readers were pretty shocked. I will say, because I think with Disney we associate that with safety and with happily ever after, and so they'd be getting near the end and there wasn't a lot of time left and things weren't really going well. They'd be like, well, Shelley is gonna get out of this. She's gonna get out of this, right? Like, she's gonna get out of this. And they get to the end and they like, there was some pretty major shock, and like a lot of people were very dismayed. My favorite reviews are where the books get like 3 stars. I'm very unsure how I feel about the ending. Very disturbed. I can only give this 3 stars, even though to me that's like a great review. That's like a 5-star review. If you're so disturbed that you had to pull some stars off, I feel like that's a great. And so now the fans are really kind of used to it, and they try to predict it and they read toward it. And I do write toward the twist endings, and they're all different. And I think there's even a fan fiction series now called Rescue Something, where someone's writing fan fiction to have other Disney characters come save my characters from the villains because they felt so bad.
You've arrived.
They're like, let's save those kids, and I'll get these messages like, as far as we can tell, only one kid's made out alive. It's the Captain Hook kid, but you know, things are really bad for him still. And like, what's the fate of the next kid going to be? Is it going to be terrible? So I kind of enjoy it because I like being Vera Strange, and you know, I think for children the ability to believe in something like that is because you feel like it's transgressive, right? You feel like it's on the edge, but of course, you know, these are fantasy worlds. They're, you know, they are spooky, but I would say they're, you know, spooky in the way that Goosebumps was, or.
So I never read Goosebumps. Did they have like that kind of ending also?
Typically, yes. Goosebumps tonally, I find, has more of a sense of humor probably than Disney Chills, although I write some fun stuff. But the sense of humor in those went way over my head when I read them as a kid. I don't know if anyone else that happened to them. Like, as an adult, I look at them, I'm like, these are funny. Like, these are kind of, right, silly. Like, R.L. Stine, like, he was joking around with a lot of this stuff. But as a kid, it went straight over my head. I was like, these are just scary. Like, I didn't get it. But I'm sure, like, I like a lot of stuff that's like that, where, you know, different things will stand out to you. Like Pixar does a great job with that, where it's like the kids, there's stuff in it for them, and there's stuff that adults like get. Right. So, but yeah, these are a little darker, and the real thing is the villains are the stars, right? They're stars of the show, so they have to triumph. Like these are the best of the Disney villains, right? So it's almost like fun having them kind of be able to come into their own. And that's what was different, because when I wrote Darth Vader, I read a Darth Vader story for Star Wars and the stories of Jedi and Sith. And my first pitch on what my story would be was deemed too dark. I was like, wow, Disney lets me go way darker. Because on the surface, to me, Disney is like a little safer and shinier. And Star Wars is a dystopian kind of dark universe. I mean, even just in the original first film, right? We have an arm being cut off early on. We have like someone getting shot, like Han Solo
being completely mutilated.
Yeah,
right.
Bloody, and then like I know Lucas tried to change it, but Han Solo shot first. He like full on murders someone, right, in the cantina. You know, people die, and you know Vader, he enjoys strangling people, like force strangling. You know, he's very murdery. And he enjoys it. Like, you know, Vader has a good time and he likes to intimidate. He's the king of the put down. So I was like, okay, let me soften this a little bit. And then I sent the pitch in, and then it came back, well, this doesn't make any sense because Vader would just kill this character. And I was like, you can't have it both ways, guys. I was like, I know he would. He's murdery. But I think, you know, the story in the end came out in a nice place. But what was interesting is how different dealing with that was, where they were like, soften it. Whereas Disney's like, no, just scare children. It's good. So sounds perfect.
Yeah. We'll start here, and then we'll get to you internet questions very soon. So, any questions here?
Anyone? Yes, Peter.
So where did Vera Strange?
Oh, that's a great question. Because I also love being Vera Strange. That's one of my most excited things I've ever done. Originally, when we were developing the brand and the series, we thought it'd be nice to have like a creepy pen name for the kids, because this age, which is middle grade, technically 8 to 12, they can still believe in things. You know, if you remember being this age, so like, what if it's like, who's this crazy, creepy person who wrote this terrifying book? Who is Vera Strange? So we thought it would be fun, number one, to scare children, since the theme here about scaring children. And I also liked the idea to distinguish it from some of the other work. My other work is largely very science fiction. And I am a big nerd, guys. Star Wars combines a lot of things I love. But these were a little different because they were going to be middle grade, they were going to be horror, they were going to be spooky, they were going to be fantasy. So I kind of like the idea of having a pen name and having that kind of a little bit of distance, because I originally was just publishing under my name, and other authors published originally under pen names, as most people know. And I think there's something nice about having a little bit of a character you can create and a little distance from your real life. But mostly I just like being Vera Strange and saying, happy nightmares, hope you enjoy your nightmares. So that's kind of where it came from. But it's kind of fun because then you also get to have, if you want to publish more books and differentiate them in different ways. That was a great question. Yes.
So from the internet audience, for both of you, was there a supporting character from these books that changed from initial draft to final publication?
Supporting character who changed.
So I would think or less.
Interesting. I was told no kissing at a certain point. So I think in the first draft of Part of Your Nightmare, there's a friend character who's named Enrique, which is a little bit modeled and an homage to the original. And I think at one point I had, okay, it was very chaste, but I had a kiss. And they're like, middle grade kids think kissing is gross. No kissing. So boys will say it's gross. And I was like, okay. So I guess maybe it changed more to a friend than a slight romance thing.
Well, that's interesting. I didn't have any who changed. No kissing thing reminded me. I sent this to cultural consultants that Mulan, they objected to Mulan hugging her parents, which again was done in ancient China.
Oh, well, that's sometimes it's funny, right? You get things out of left field where you're like, oh, I didn't consider that. Like,
but they didn't object to all my kiss scenes. So.
They're like, they can make out all they want, but just don't hug your dad, guys. Yeah, that's an interesting one.
You're right. Right.
Well, maybe your book is.
The consultants didn't watch the movie.
I feel like this has become more of a thing in modern times, that there's more. There is a whole department that looks at diversity and inclusion. Yeah, there's interesting things, like in the next book, and I can't say who it is or what it is, but I was encouraged to put more Native American characters in. I was like, really? You want me to write Native more? Because I was kind of like, I don't know if I should really touch that one. It was very strange. And they were like, no, do it. I was like, yeah, maybe just, as supporting, but I was like, that was an interesting, because usually they're pushing the opposite, like, don't write things that are too far outside. We're navigating interesting times in the world. No hugging. I like it. I got no kissing, and you get to make out, but no hugging.
Right. Oh, and an interesting thing was, so like, the emperor, I had them, the first version, they were sitting around, like the emperor and her council members were sitting around a table. But apparently, in China, nobody sits around the emperor, so it's just Mulan on her throne, and there's a small table in front to put stuff on, and everybody else is just standing around.
I think it's interesting that they were striving for so much historical accuracy in what is kind of, I know it's not exactly fantasy, but that is definitely verging on,
Legend.
Mm-hmm.
Well, although this series does tend to be more historical than
you're right.
The other ones, like especially actually the one before mine, Emma Theriot's Rebel Rose, that's like very based in the French Revolution. This one is, this one spans, it's no specific dynasty. I kind of based a lot of the clothing and the government on the Tang Dynasty, but since they gave me such a wide range, I kind of figured I'd just be more free with it.
That's so fun. I mean, I feel like writing, you come on to things that you don't even anticipate sometimes, that you're going to have to learn about or do. I would say, please don't ever look at my Google search history. I think most writers would be flagged as terrorists or serial killers, right? Yes.
Next question. Given your pick, both of you, what Disney universe would you want to live in?
Oh, live in. That's a good one. because I always say, like, I don't want to live in this. I love Star Wars. I don't want to live in the Star Wars universe. It's not a great place to live. I'd rather live in Star Trek.
Not really anxious China either.
Yeah, it's probably not good for the ladies. I think Lilo and Stitch. Like, let's go to Hawaii and hang out with a cute alien. I'm kind of obsessed with Stitch. Or, you know, Moana.
Yeah, or then Encanto Village, like somewhere safe.
That was delightful. Yeah, somewhere I'm like, because a lot of them I'm like, I love Sleeping Beauty, but middle age is not the best for the ladies. Yeah, I'm gonna go with something. I was born in the Caribbean. I'm like, I'm going with Lilo and Stitch. And especially if I get to pal around with Stitch.
Yeah, Moana's Island.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, hang out with The Rock.
There you go.
You know, Dwayne Johnson. He's funny. He's good company. Yeah.
Is both of you wrote Disney stories. Did you get access to the Disney archives for research? And is it true that the NDAs under IP are very tight?
Oh, yes. There are NDAs.
Yeah, I had to sign an NDA before I even saw the audition material. I'm sure you did too.
Yeah, I did too. And I feel that, yes, and that's true for Lucasfilm as well. They're all under the same umbrella. But I don't find that I'm as heavily policed as maybe some of the other people who write for them. I don't know why. Maybe it's just because I write spooky villain stuff. Yeah, but they are pretty strict, but I wouldn't say I'm privy to a lot of stuff I'm not supposed to know. They don't really tell us that much.
My editor has access to a whole wiki page that's like the Disney Princess wiki that has everything. And at one point I brought up getting access to that. I don't think she ever replied to that email. So she forgot.
Oh, that's true. You know, I did use Wikipedia a lot when I was working on my Star Wars story, which is the Star Wars version of Wikipedia. They call it Wikipedia, and I actually did write a Wookiee character as well, because from the beginning I was like, I'm writing a Wookiee. I don't care what they let me do in the story, but I'm putting a Wookiee in it because they're underrepresented and they're so awesome.
Representation counts, right?
Yeah. So in terms of keeping things consistent, I find that with my stuff, I get a little more permissiveness because I am importing them into the real world. So I get to kind of mess around with some things. I don't know if there's a secret archive. I did intern at Disney in college, and I was in the old animation building, and that was cool because they had all of the old cells from Disney films all over the walls. Maybe we need to break in, like the Death Star, steal the plans.
Because next time I have lunch with my editor, you can distract me.
Yeah.
Didn't you mention at Star Wars Celebration about something came up with what a Wookiee smells like?
There were all kinds of things, like a big question, which actually nobody could really give me a clear answer on, which surprised me, was, does Darth Vader understand Wookiee? What do you guys think? Can Vader understand Wookiee? Because we all know Han Solo can and Leia can, but could Vader? And I theorized that I thought he could because of his training with Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan's had a lot of dealings, as has Yoda, with the Wookiees. But it was made very unclear, so we sort of edged on the side of him being able to sort of mind Jedi understand using the Force, because the Force is like this kind of wiggle room thing where you can just kind of be like, he has powers, guys. He uses powers. And writing Wookiee was interesting to write. Wookiee speaking. I was very surprised. I was like, there's got to be a Star Wars nerd out there that knows the clear answer on Vader and Wookiee.
I kind of thought they would have like this person in their company that's just like the repository of all Star Wars novels.
Yeah, like a list of all the languages that they would understand. And my other theory was that maybe he would have a translator chip in his helmet, which would make sense to me. Because, C-3PO speaks how many different protocol languages or whatever. And, he has this helmet, and the helmet does have readouts and does do things. This is the level of minutia we get into. So I theorize he would have a translator chip, but my questions still remain unanswered.
If you had to choose a Disney song that wasn't in the same world as your title, which song would relate the closest to your story?
Oh, God, that's like a real brain teaser one. The closest to which, sorry, because I've written so many. To me, I feel like a lot of the Beauty and the Beast music would work with a lot of the Sleeping Beauty stuff, because they both have this like castle-y, like Rose, even though I know Sleeping Beauty, the music's amazing because a lot of it's from Tchaikovsky, from the original ballet. I've already written a new one. I use a lot of the song titles and lyrics as chapter names in my books, and I'll usually pull from them because the lyrics and the songs are so great. I feel like Let It Go should be in every movie. The new Encanto had a lot of good music too.
Right. Wait, what's the question? Which one would fit our lives better or our story better?
Yeah, this song that wasn't in the same world as your titles, which song would relate the closest to your soul?
Be prepared for Maleficent to come. I'm trying to think. Like, there's so many good songs. Like, the thing is, I always take the lyrics and twist them. So instead of like, "Can you feel the love tonight?" I'd be like, "Can you feel the terror tonight?" We need to brush up on our songs
I know.
because we write prose too. So they're not breaking out into song, even though that's so iconic to the movies.
Yeah. If there's the family magical song,
Mhm.
Mirabelle is feeling very unspecial. And Mulan kind of feels.
I could see that for her. I think Encanto has some parallels because it's about the family. I think that was the real nice thing they did in Encanto. I don't know. I'm like, now I'm thinking back to the original Snow White. But yeah, they have so much. There's just so much to mine for them, and Disney just has so many great properties, and they're also different.
They are, and they've really kind of changed with the times too. So
Yeah, it's been fun.
What personal rule or trait did you want to instill with your heroine?
Oh yeah. What were you trying to say with Mulan, or what was it that you found most drew you to her as a character?
Well, I kind of touched on this earlier. Is that the idea of her selflessness and so forth, and also, so there's that, and also it was a lot of fun to kind of write the sexism that she was dealing with. So there's a lot of overt sexism, but I was also kind of interested in the psychological aspects of kind of women trying to survive in a man's world. That's something everyone can
Very
relate
relatable.
to. Yeah, and so a lot of imposter syndrome, kind of people telling her that she's not good enough and having to overcome that. So there's this one moment in the book. So kind of personal story at this point. So 20 years ago, I was in a very unhealthy relationship, abusive, pretty much. So would show up at dinner with things that were a list of things that were wrong with me. Like
Oh, geez.
really messed up stuff.
That's some narcissism right there.
Yeah, definitely. And so the thing that threw me off at that point was because everything he said had a grain of truth to it. He'd be like, "You're selfish," and I could definitely think of times when I'm selfish. Stuff like that. You put yourself above others. Yeah, I can think of times when I do that. I can always be better. And so it kind of threw me into a tailspin for a long time, and until one day it just kind of clicked for me. And I woke up one day and I faced him. I was like, "Okay, you're right. I do have a lot of character faults. I do have a lot of things I need to do to improve. But the thing is, I shouldn't be working on those to be with you. You're not the reason that I should be trying to improve. I should do it for myself. I should do it for God." And so that was kind of a really big breakthrough moment for me. And so
That's
what I'm
an
writing.
amazing story.
Thank you. And so I'm writing Mulan, and there's a very similar moment in there where Mulan is like, someone's talking to her and they're telling her, "You're very inexperienced. You don't know what you're doing. You need to rule this country with me." And throughout the whole book, she's struggling with that because the truth is, she is very inexperienced. She does make a lot of mistakes. But then, it clicks for her too. She's like, "Oh, you're right. I do have all these weaknesses. I do need help, but I don't need it from you because just because there's things wrong with me doesn't mean I have to let other people dictate my life. Because I can still make decisions about who helps me, and I can still try. I'm still worthy."
That's so great. Really powerful stuff. Yeah, I love writing characters in my stories that it's like not male gaze. I tend to flip a lot of tropes where it's like, because there's so many of this stuff where it's like the girl can't function without the guy, and I'll flip it where I'll have this strong woman who's like, "You're cute and all, but I gotta go save the world," and the guy's like, "I can't function without you. You're the only thing that keeps me going." Because I think it's kind of funny when you flip the narrative a little bit. In terms of my books, pretty much every book goes like this. The character commits a transgression, which means they do something they know is wrong for reasons they feel justified justified in, which invites the horror, aka the Disney villain, into their life. And the big rule of thumb is don't make deals with Disney villains, guys. It never works out well for anyone involved. So don't make deals with, even Ursula. Ursula's the queen of the deal. She's going to find a way around or trap you. Don't make deals with Disney villains. It won't turn out well. It's a good lesson. It's a good life lesson to learn.
That's all the questions I have for internet audience. If you have any other questions in person, if not, go ahead and
Thanks, you guys. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening to us. We appreciate it.